Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now, from the Sunbury Motors studio, here's Steve Jones.
Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. And we will, of course, be back in the Sunbury Motors studio tomorrow. Tonight, Penn State basketball. They have Indiana at Assembly Hall in Bloomington at 6:30. Play-by-play call today. It's the obvious one. It is Eli Gold with a great call on the Alabama Radio Network.
Here's Tua stepping back, loads up, looks long, throws, end zone, touchdown! Alabama! Devontae Smith! Touchdown, Alabama! And the Crimson Tide has once again ascended to the top of the college football mountain. Their 5th national championship in 9 years, their 17th overall. And for Coach Nick Saban, a career 6th national championship, a number matched only by the legendary Paul Bear Bryant. Alabama is back as the champion of college football. How about that?
Another great call by the outstanding Eli Gold, someone I have tremendous respect for. Eli and I have crossed paths many times. Remember, we had him on the show last year, Sean, and we had the two of us had a good time talking that day, because we always do. And I'm happy for Eli that they won last night. A couple notes on that game. Number one, I can be critical of Jalen Hurts, the quarterback, the throwing quarterback. But one area I'm not going to be critical of, I thought he was a great teammate last night. Didn't sulk, didn't sit on the bench. He was supporting Tua when he was out there. I thought he could not have handled, and he handled the post-game interviews really well. You know, I give him all the credit in the world. He acted first class all the way, Jalen Hurts did, and something that obviously had to sting. I'm sure he had confidence in his own mind that, hey, look, we're down at halftime, but I'll bring us back. All right? And then to be told that you're not going to get the chance to do it, and yet to still go out there, to his credit, and he supported his teammate and he supported his team. Give him a lot of credit for that. Now, as for Melky Brown, how on green earth was he not thrown out of last night's game? He throws a punch at the Georgia player. Then the Alabama players get him out of there. Okay. Then he gets to the sideline, and he goes after a coach. And then he's back in the game clotheslining a guy, which was a legal tackle, by the way. It was very illegal. But he's back in the game. What?
Yeah, I was watching the Homers call on ESPN2 with Joe Tessitore on the Alabama sideline, and they got a great shot of him in one of those portable chairs, kind of with his back toward the camera, getting a unique angle of as to what's going on. And there was a group of players over there just trying to just calm him down.
But he went out. Okay, first of all, he throws a punch in the game. That's enough to get you thrown out. Okay.
And the coaches on the game film channel, they said the exact. David Cutcliffe, without any hesitation, said, "Yeah, he should have been thrown out."
Okay, so now he's not thrown out. Okay, all right. So that's what they didn't see it. Well, again, they threw a flag, but for goodness sakes, all right. So now he goes to his sideline. So okay, that part's done. The officials have made their ruling. They call the penalty, but they don't throw him out. Okay. But now he goes to his sideline, freaks out, and then he goes after a coach. Huh? And the Alabama coaches let him back in the game. He went after a coach. And they let him back in the game. What kind of organization are they running over there? I know they win, but...
Yeah, I didn't see which one it was. I know it wasn't Saban.
Well, Well, Nick didn't see it. So this is not a case where, because Nick had his back to it. But I don't know. I don't care if it's a strength and conditioning coach. I don't care if it's the guy in charge of player development. I don't care. They're all coaches. I don't know which guy, but he went after him. Like, what are you doing? To me, that's automatic. Hey, you're sitting the rest of the day. I don't really give a darn what we're playing for here. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. He comes in, and on the kickoff return, he makes the tackle right away. Okay? So he makes the tackle. And my first thought is, why are you in the game? Oh, boy. Wow. There's a lot about, obviously, did Georgia lose the game last night? I'll tell you what really won the game. There's a lot about Tua, obviously. But I thought the Alabama defense in the second half really, really, really stepped up and played a great second half. They gave up the one long play on the touchdown pass. Okay. And other than that, what else did they give up? They didn't give up much of anything. I thought the Alabama defense, did a great job of keeping them in the game and opened the door for their offense to steady and make plays.
Yeah, I know a lot of people aren't going to feel bad about Alabama, but just all the injuries that they had to endure this year. And I was just, you and I were kind of going back and forth last night. I was just floored as just the total amount of freshmen they had out there at one time late in the game. Not just not just Tua and the wide receiver that caught the ball to win it.
The last play of the game, Alabama had 5 freshmen on the field. Quarterback, running back, 2 wideouts, and the left tackle.
That's startling. That's amazing.
5
That's amazing.
True freshmen on the field.
That goes back. That falls right on Nick and his recruiting. That's incredible.
5 true freshmen on the field on the final play. Quarterback, running back, 2 wideouts, left tackle. It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. And again, you're right. That goes to their recruiting and what they've done. Because that was, think about how remarkable that is. We talk about young players as to what young players can and can't do. And they stepped in there, played, executed, won. Now, you're already getting, by the way, Penn State finished 8th in both polls. As I pointed out earlier, look, you finish, you finish. Okay, I got it. But I look at UCF, what they get, 4 first-place votes among the writers. Alabama got the other 57. And that's fine. They went 13-0. That's perfectly fine. I know everybody wants to, go out and push and root for the little guy and so forth and show the little guy can go out there and play with the big guys. And, yeah, they beat Auburn and the whole thing. But, it's not realistic either. It literally is not realistic.
I was able to get Brad Edwards on the line. We could have him now or 4:35. Your call.
Why don't we take a break, and then we'll come back with Brad.
We'll do.
All right?
Sure.
All right. As we continue here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
From Learfield, this is Penn State Nittany Lion football.
Long and deep far side, he goes to Hamilton. Inside the 10, cuts to the 5. Touchdown, Penn State. It's going to be Barkley. 10, 15, far side 20, 25, 30, to the 40, 50. Goodbye, he is gone. Saquon Barkley, 92 yards. Pressure, hit hit at the 5 by Gibbons, and down he goes at the 5-yard line. Delivers near corner. Hamilton reaches up in the end zone. He's got it. Touchdown, Penn State. And the Nittany Lions answer right back. Barkley hurdles for a first down inside the 25-yard line. Now that is a first down with style. The Nittany Lion football team, Fiesta Bowl champions, as they beat Washington 35-28.
The Penn State Nittany Lions, Fiesta Bowl champions. When you think sports, think News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Welcome back. Final half hour, Brad Edwards from ESPN Radio Game Day is going to join us. Then tomorrow, Neil Coulon will be on the show. And we'll talk about the Steelers. We already had Ray Fittipaldo on today, and we'll get Neil's take on it tomorrow. Neil's actually in Seattle right now. He's out on the coast for a little bit doing some work for USA Today. And we will talk with Neil tomorrow. So Brad Edwards' final half hour. Penn State finished 8th in the final poll. They went 11-2. They were 4 points away from perfection. It's interesting. People talk about the ability to close games. And Alabama obviously closed last night. And Georgia did not. Same thing with Oklahoma. They didn't. But you know, the way I look at this is they give you 60 minutes to do this. There are usually 3 spots in the game where you can do it, where you can win the game. One of them is the first half. You can win a game in the first half. That's not talked about very often, but you can. You can win a game in the first half. And, you know, and then there's usually a spot somewhere. In basketball, usually it's between right around the under 12 to the under 8. You can win the game right there. That's usually the second time you really have a chance to win a game. And then, of course, there's the end. Well, in football, you can win a game in the first half. I really believe that there is a point between the about 7 or 8 minutes to go in the third and maybe about 12 minutes to go in the game where you can win the game right there. In that spot right there. If you can't put somebody away at that point, you leave the door open. And Georgia could not put Alabama away last night. The fact is the Alabama defense hung in there enough where it's only 13-0 at the break. And to start the second half, when he made that scramble to get out of there, on 3rd and 7 to get a first down. You could just kind of feel at that point that suddenly the Alabama confidence level began to change. And then he made a couple of throws, and then once he made a couple of throws, then they scored a touchdown. Now it's 13-7. Now you cut the lead in half. Georgia did, to its credit, on the ensuing series, hit a big play. But you could see Alabama was starting to find some rhythm against their defense. And the other part is, did you notice how Georgia started to lay back on defense?
Yeah.
I mean, they started rushing 3 and 4 and not blitzing people.
I think last night's game had a little bit of everything. I mean, it was a great defensive struggle in the first half. Of course, it's been well documented on this show and others too about last year's national championship game with Alabama's defense being on the field for 99 plays. I'll be honest, Steve, with under 7 in the third last night when Georgia was up 20-7, I was pretty much on the cusp saying, boy, they got a shot to lock this thing up, because you and I were going back and forth in regards to, I was at one point last night, Alabama was on pace to being the defense out there, 84, 85 plays?
94 plays, because Georgia ran 47 plays in the first half, so it's very similar to last year's game. The number of plays were being run, and you could see Alabama, their defense looked a little tired at the end of the first half. I thought they were out there too often. That's when this kid came in and started making some plays for them. It kept the Alabama offense out there longer. It took pressure off the defense, and it was impressive. Now you start looking to next year and how everything's going to fit, and people are looking at what is next year going to look like. You expect Alabama to be right there in the mix. You expect Clemson to be there in the mix. Now, even though you lose Michelle and you lose Chubb, and you're going to probably lose Roquan Smith. you're going to lose Carter. You're going to lose Sanders for Georgia. Fromm's going to be back, and DeAndre Swift's going to take a bigger role. I mean, Swift's a pretty good player out of Philly. Well, he's going to be a part of the mix. Do you expect Oklahoma to step back a bit? Yeah, you do. Ohio State, to be honest with you, at quarterback, I think they're going to be better off with Haskins being their quarterback. Haskins is a much better thrower than J.T. Barrett. Now, Barrett was a great leader, so let's never take that away from him. But you look at Haskins in the Michigan game, pretty good thrower. I mean, he can throw the football. Wisconsin's an interesting team. They have a lot of the same players. They don't play the same schedule, but they do have to play at Penn State next November. Okay, that is a huge game for both programs because Wisconsin is not challenged in the West. They aren't. But when you have a crossover game, it means a trip to play at Penn State. All right, now you're challenged, which now brings us to Penn State. Well, I expect the offensive line to be better next year just by getting older. Bates, Fries. Now Fries is in there playing and established himself. Gonzalez. I thought Gonzalez had a really good bowl game in the Fiesta Bowl. I thought Steven Gonzalez played really well. I expect McGovern to get better at the center spot. Now you're going to have Mennett. You're going to have Chaz Wright. You're going to have Mike Miranda available, C.J. Thorpe available, and Des Holmes available, all in depth roles. The wide receiver part, I think, is going to be just fine. I think the running back part is going to be just fine. You know, Saquon Barkley is a once-in-a-lifetime player, but you also have a terrific talent in Miles Sanders. You have a terrific talent in Journey Brown that you can spot in there, and then you decide what you want to do with Ricky Slade. McSorley is the key to the whole thing. I mean, having him back is a piece that is so important, vital, and it gives you so much confidence as what the offense could do because of the kind of player he is. And then there's the Tommy Stevens factor as to how he works into this as well and gives options to Ricky Ronnie. Defensively, I think up front, the ends are going to be just fine. I think the tackle spots are going to be okay in this. Because remember, Givens is going to be one of the tackles. And I think that's going to help. Let's see what kind of development there is with Antonio Shelton and so forth and how that plays out. And the linebacker part, I think Cam Brown, Koa Farmer, there's no question that, they'll be right there in the mix. Can Micah Parsons make that transition and be that middle linebacker for you? And they recruited pretty well at linebacker overall, too. I think the secondary is going to be very good. Amani Oruwariye, John Reed's going to be back. Tariq Castro-Fields, Lamont Wade, Nick Scott, Aaron Monroe, Garrett Taylor. I think the secondary is going to be just fine. I think the defensive end spots are going to be just fine. I think the defensive end spots are going to be pretty good. Buck Holtz, Sharif Miller, Shaka Toney.
I just want to see John Reed play a full season healthy. He just deserves that so much.
Oh, he does. He does. And, and John was – I talked to John briefly at one of the bowl practices, and I know he's feeling great. He feels great. Okay. So, I mean, that's I think he'll come back, and he's going to be really good for them, and that gives them a lot of options. The question is going to be is how the young linebackers develop in all this. That's what I think I want to see out of that, because I think the defensive front's going to be fine. I really don't have a lot of issues with the tackle spot. Yeah, I know Parker Cothran, Curtis Cothran, Tyrell Chavis obviously are really good, but I think Robert Windsor and Kevin Givens give you a really good starting point, especially Givens. I think Givens could be outstanding. Now, can an Antonio Shelton step up and be a part of what's going on there? Could Fred Hansard maybe step up, or Corey Bolds into those spots there in the depth spots? And then we'll see the recovery, obviously, of Ellison Jordan. But I think defensively they're going to be pretty good, especially if Parsons can give you something at that middle linebacker spot that's special. And we'll find out in the spring, because they're going to find out right away. He's going to be there. And he's obviously a very special talent. And then, you mentioned that offense. And, the punting part, the return part, you're in good shape all there. Obviously, you need a place kicker out of that. We'll find out how the kid does there. So, I'm looking forward to it. Final half hour, Brad Edwards of ESPN Radio will join us. He was at the game last night in Atlanta to talk about what he saw in last night's game, get his impressions of how it played out last night. We're looking forward to talking to him. Today's show is brought to you by our good friends at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Our thanks to Ray Fittipaldo, who joined us in the second half hour of the show today, previewing the Steelers in Jacksonville, which Sean is going to on Sunday. You will be present.
I will be there.
At
several
the game.
layers of clothing. I'm not letting the cold stop me.
Let's see what is it supposed to be. 20 degrees on Sunday? Does that sound right? We're supposed to have a brief warm up, then get cold again, right?
At or near blackjack. Yep.
Let's see here. Temperature on Saturday 34. Temperature on Sunday 20.
Ooh. Bring it. Can't wait.
Times of clouds and sun. I'll tell you right now, man.
Jacksonville weather right there, man.
Hey, check it out, man. 21. You know what that means? Raiders are going to Vegas. Blackjack. Oh, you could do anything with that segment.
Taking your calls at 800-795-9565. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Great to have you with us today on the show. Neil Coulon with us tomorrow. Looking forward to that. Our thanks to Ray Fittipaldo for being on the show today. Time now to talk about last night's national championship game that Alabama won in overtime, 26-23, and he's on ESPN Radio College Game Day, and that is Brad Edwards. Brad, welcome back. Great to hear you again.
Happy New Year. That was a fun one last night, huh? Unless you're a Georgia fan.
Yeah, well, if you're a Georgia fan, you feel like you just replayed the Super Bowl. So, Brad, I think you can have more guts when you have 5 national championships under your belt. But still,
True.
that was a heck of a move that Nick made last night. When you watch Hurts play, and you've watched him play a lot, Brad, is it the accuracy thing that just flat out holds him back?
I don't even know that it's just accuracy. I think it's decision-making. And when I say decision-making, I don't mean as far as making good decisions. It's more making quick decisions.
Yeah.
With Alabama and with Saban in general, what he wants from his quarterback, first and foremost, is don't make a big mistake. Don't do anything that's going to make it easy for the other team. And this is all based on Saban's knowledge and his understanding that he has a great defense. He always does. And so if you can just make every drive end with a kick, then if you're not giving the other team the ball in your half of the field and you're making them drive, you're going to be in good shape most of the time. And so that's always been what he's placed the priority on, not making mistakes. And what we've learned with Hurts over these last 2 seasons is that when they play the better defenses, the fronts that are capable of slowing down their running game and forcing them to make plays through the air, he's not good enough to do it. Now, look, in the semifinal against Clemson, they were able to get a 10-0 lead, and the defense dominated, and they didn't have to take this measure of going to the backup. And I think they were prepared to do it from everything I heard. There were a lot of people who thought we were going to see Tagovailoa in that game against Clemson. But because of the way the game played out, they weren't forced into it. But last night, they ultimately got to a place where just simply not making mistakes wasn't enough. They needed someone to make plays. And, as bold as it was to go to an untested player in that spot, there are a lot of other people would say, well, he had no choice. I mean, if he's trying to win the game, it was the only way he was going to win it. personally, my only surprise was that Hurts didn't come out and play the first series of the second half. I thought at halftime he'd give them the usual pep talk. They'd make their adjustments, come out, give Hurts one series, one chance. And if it didn't work, then he would make the move. But I was not surprised that we saw the change made. I was surprised that he did it just straight out of halftime, which tells you two things. One is how convinced he was that Hurts was not going to turn it around and all of a sudden start making plays through the air. And the other is how much confidence he had in his backup quarterback that he could do that, even though he'd never seen him going against a very good defense.
I thought the biggest play to me was when that third down scramble he made to keep the drive alive, and then eventually it led to the first touchdown of the game for Alabama. How impressed were you by his poise in that setting?
So I think people who hadn't watched him play probably figured that from everything they'd heard that he was just a pocket passer, that he's just a good passer. He was a dual threat quarterback is where he was categorized coming out of high school. And I think you could see that. Alabama ran him a bunch of times. And so if he becomes the quarterback going forward, that will still be a part of what they do, running the QB. Now, he's a more, how would I phrase it? He's more elusive, I think, than Hurts. I mean, Hurts has speed and Hurts has power, but it takes him a little while to get out of the blocks. But once he gets going downhill, you don't want to get in his way if you're a DB because he's a big, strong guy. But in terms of the ability to avoid a rush and just kind of speed to outrun people in pursuit, I think Tagovailoa has more of that, and so he is a dual threat quarterback, and I think that's kind of scary actually to people who are having to go up against Alabama when you throw that on top of all the other true freshmen who were out there. I don't know if you noticed and how much they were playing it up on the broadcast, but on the game tying touchdown late in the fourth quarter, there were 5 true freshmen on the Alabama offense in that play. It was not just the quarterback, but the left tackle, the running back, and 2 of the 3 receivers were all true freshmen, and they're not going to look. Calvin Ridley is probably going to be the first receiver taken in the draft, and I think both of the Alabama first and second leading rushers, Damian Harris and Bo Scarborough, will probably come out early as well. So they'll lose some guys who had some pretty significant stats off of this offense, but I would be shocked if they're not a better offensive team next year.
And Brad, there's always subtleties, but how important of a subtlety do you think, just in terms of the look the Georgia defense got, was the fact that he's left-handed?
I don't know. I'm not sure how much difference that does make. I'm sure it has some impact, but it's hard for me to say. I think the bigger thing is, as I said earlier with Hurts, it's about how quick he makes decisions, and so.
Oh, I know.
Hurts would, if you're going from one to the other, like Georgia had to last night, first half to second half, you're used to Hurts kind of dropping back and he's kind of surveying the defense. He's looking, and even when he recognizes what he wants to do, it takes him a little while to react. Part of that is because he's waiting for a guy to be wide open.
Right.
That's just the way he's been trained as a Nick Saban quarterback. First of all, don't make a mistake, and that means don't throw an interception. And he only threw 1 all year, which is amazing.
Right.
But like I said, you get to a point where you need a little bit more than that when you're trailing by double digits in the second half. But that's the difference, I think, with the defense, is how quickly Tagovailoa would decide what he wanted to do and get rid of the ball, and of course deliver it on target. And so you got to be, kind of jarred by that as a defense when you go from one guy to the other, and now all of a sudden the things that were working for you are no longer working. And while you could say, okay, hey, it wasn't Jalen Hurts' fault. I mean, you can't put it all on him. Receivers weren't getting open in the first half. They weren't opening up big enough holes for the running backs, et cetera. Yes, all those things are true, but the simple change in quarterback made the defense adjust how it was going to play. They couldn't cheat up on the run anymore. They had to respect the pass, and it opened up a whole lot more stuff. And so, indirectly, it was Hurts. And I think here's the biggest thing, and this is a bigger picture kind of college football. thing. With that style of quarterback like Jalen Hurts, if you're going to build an offense around a guy like that, what you're basically committing to is that about 1/3, if not more, of your offensive plays, the ball is not going to touch anyone else's hands. It's just going to be the quarterback. Right. And if you're Louisville and you have Lamar Jackson as your quarterback and he's clearly your best playmaker, that's fine. But when you are loaded with 4- and 5-star running backs and receivers and 1/3 of your plays, the ball is never going to them, that's an issue. And so I don't think it's as much about Jalen Hurts specifically as much as it is about, Alabama with all the talent they have across the board on offense. They need someone who can distribute the ball to those guys a lot better than Hurts was doing.
I think there have been a lot of constants during Nick Saban's time at Alabama, but to me, Brad, I've always felt the one constant he's always had is he's always had a great defensive line and a deep defensive line. How important has that factor been, especially in today's game, the way it's played, that you can have as many players up front that you don't have to blitz to get pressure on somebody?
Yeah, now look, I think this year they had a little bit of an issue with that because they had all the injuries at linebacker, and some of those guys were their best pass rushers, and they were out for most of the year, and so they were having to kind of manufacture stuff with blitzing, including a lot of blitzing of DBs. And you even saw some of that last night. Now, the previous 2 years, they had some really good natural pass rushers, whether those were the true defensive linemen or just big outside linebackers, serving in that role. And yeah, that is a big deal, and it absolutely affects the way you defend. Look at the semifinal game against Clemson. The way that they were able to, with 5 men in the box for pretty much the entire game, they were able to contain the Clemson running game and drop 6 into coverage every play. I mean, that's huge to be able to do that. And so it is big. And, of course, the other thing about it is that now Saban has kind of learned, he's adjusted to the up-tempo that most teams run. And there was a point where, teams would go up-tempo and he'd have these big guys who he couldn't get them off the field and they became a liability. And he's kind of learned how to manage that in terms of where you get the opportunities to, get one guy off, get another guy on. But that is the difference between them and most of the other teams that they're playing. It's not just that they've got 4 or 5 of those guys. It's like they have 9 or 10 of them. And they're those guys last night, and one of them is probably going to be a first-round pick coming up in a few months, Deron Payne, who was kind of the star of the Clemson game, and he made some more big plays last night. He's going to come out early, I'm pretty sure. And it's just kind of next man up, and it just seems like they just got a cloning device, and they just keep churning out more of them.
Brad, big picture now. We saw, in fact, bowl games on ESPN were up 12% over last year. You and I both know that the game on Monday night got a big rating. I mean, the overnights are huge for it. Overall, what do you think the state of the game is, considering you've traveled around now to a lot of different places? You joined us when you were in State College, as a matter of fact. So you probably have a better read and feel for it than anybody else because you've been to actual places and you've seen this happen. So where is the state of college football right now to you?
I do notice a decline in attendance from what I do on a Saturday, which even though I might be on a campus doing a show, we spend most of our day watching about 8 games at a time and kind of talking through them to the national audience. And so you see a lot of the crowd shots, and you do see a lot more empty seats than you used to. Part of that is probably because some of these teams have just kind of invested in facilities and expanded their capacity, their stadium beyond what's realistic. Right. When they're having a bad season, they can't fill those seats. But I think there are a lot of other reasons that fans are preferring to stay at home and watch as opposed to going to the stadium and watching in person for games that aren't really big. And so I think that is a part of it. You'll see a lot of references to ratings being down. But I think that's in large part due to just the number of different outlets that are televising games. The audience has to. I think it's just getting spread out among more networks, more channels. as opposed to there being fewer people who are watching. Now, last night's game was a better rating than the previous two, which might surprise some people considering it was two SEC teams. All three of those years, it was two Southeastern teams. And just the reality of it is that Georgia has more of a national following than Clemson does. And that in itself is what caused it to be a bigger rating, on top of it being a great game. But it still wasn't close to the rating of the first playoff championship game, which is Ohio State and Oregon, which not only succeeded because it was teams from two different parts of the country, but also because the Southeast wasn't playing in the game. And the Southeast is the most dedicated part of the college football viewing audience. You could put any teams out there in a bowl game, and one of the 2 or 3 highest rated markets nationally is going to be Birmingham, Alabama. Right. I mean, you could put, you could have Boise State against Arizona State, and outside of Boise, there's going to be no audience bigger on an average basis than Birmingham. There'll be more people interested in Birmingham than in Phoenix. So, I mean, that's just the way that it is, and so two SEC teams is not ideal. I think it's kind of funny because we always hear all these conspiracy theorists. ESPN loves the SEC. You're just trying to push the agenda to get SEC teams in the championship game. It's like, no, that's a ratings disaster. I mean, we're fortunate to get what we got with two SEC teams, but that's like a worst-case scenario for us with ratings, is to have two Southeastern teams based on what we know about what rate. Now, Alabama, you take Alabama every day of the week, but you want them against a team from another part of the country. Get them against, a Penn State or a Texas or a USC. That's a ratings bonanza. But putting Alabama against another Southeastern team, it's not ideal.
Brad, always a pleasure. Appreciate your time very much. I've heard the conversation's always great.
Oh, Steve, I appreciate it, and looking forward to doing it again next year. Should be. I think Nittany Lions are going to be hanging around for a little while.
I think a lot of teams are. It's one of the areas where I think where college football has hit it in terms of right, because a lot of the, quote, blue bloods are now in the mix in this thing, and I think it makes a difference.
Yep, and that's another thing that I think makes this run by Alabama more remarkable. Yeah, is that, back when Bear Bryant was doing it, there were, I don't know, what would you say, 6 to 8 teams that legitimately were good enough to win.
I agree,
but there's more than that. I wouldn't say there's a ton more than that. But the money that's being invested now, it's just amazing that they've been doing what they've been doing for as long as they have.
Thanks so much, Brad. Again, I don't want to take up any more of your time, but it's always great. Thanks so much for the time.
All right, thank you, Steve.
That's Brad Edwards from ESPN Radio, College Game Day. And if you miss any of our interviews on the Steve Jones Show, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast less than an hour after we wrap up the live shows here on News Radio 1070 WKOK. We drop the show as a podcast on both the Apple Podcast app, iTunes, and Google Play. If you listen to the show on iTunes, don't hesitate to leave us a review. We've noticed a big spike in listenership in our podcasts over the past couple of weeks. Lots of Penn State fans from across the country catching our comprehensive coverage of the Fiesta Bowl and the entire 2017 Penn State football season, and we can't thank you enough for that. And also, we can't thank enough Sunbury Motors, making this show possible every single day as we go into our 7th year. Sunbury Motors, Ford, Lincoln, Hyundai in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia on the Strip, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Back from the break, we'll give you highlights from this afternoon's press conference. They finally made it official. John Gruden, the new head coach of the Oakland Raiders. Back after this on WKOK.
In 103 years, there's been many firsts at Sunbury Motors Ford, but never one like this. SMC is selling vehicles for half price. You heard right. Sunbury Motors Ford is taking up to $15,007 off their remaining 2017 vehicles. That's a savings of up to 53%. SMC is serious about moving 67 2017 cars, SUVs, and trucks. They're slashing the price on 2017 F-150s up to $14,500. Take a whopping $8,000 off all remaining 2017 Ford Escapes. Take $7,000 off all remaining 2017 Ford Ford Edges and Explorers. Lease a 2017 Ford C-Max Energy for only $179 a month for 24 months with 0 down. That's zilch, nothing, nada. Hurry in to Sunbury Motors Ford in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury, to be one of 67 lucky people to save 53% on your next new vehicle.
Sean Carey wrapping up the Steve Jones Show with you on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Sarah Bennick's at the anchor desk this afternoon. She'll have the late day news roundup after CBS at 5:06. And then tonight, Kevin Hurd and the Chief Dave Ritchie. We've got high school basketball on WKOK from the Shikellamy Fieldhouse, the Phil Lockhoff Gym. It's the Braves and the Sewans-Grove Seals. They will renew their backyard rivalry, backcourt rivalry in this case. All right, so earlier this afternoon, the Oakland Raiders made it official. It's kind of the best, not really the best kept secret in the National Football League over the past week or two, making the announcement. John Gruden, 10-year, $100 million contract as the new head coach of the Oakland Raiders. Gruden acknowledged his former players in attendance.
I'd also really like to thank all of the Raider players that are here today. I saw Charles Woodson. Brady fumbled that ball. Tim Brown, Howie Long, Russell Maryland, Eric Allen, Jerry Rice, Jim Otto, Ted Hendricks. It's about the people for me.
And also tip the cap to the current owner of the Oakland Raiders.
I'd just like to thank Mark Davis, thank Mrs. Davis for this opportunity. I used to get phone calls from Al Davis at 3 a.m. Now I get them from Mark Davis at 3 a.m.
So how did the ball get rolling for Gruden to become the next head coach, second time around in Oakland?
Mark came to me a couple weeks ago, asked me if I had any intentions of coaching, and with the support of my family, I said, yes, I do. And it's a mysterious way that it all came together.
And it was time for John to leave the press box and get back to the sidelines.
I'm ready to roll. I'm just ready to go. I'm at a point in my life where I need another challenge, and I know I have a lot to prove, and I'm eager to prove that I can do it.
And also, Gruden was asked about current Raiders quarterback Derek Carr.
He has a great arm talent. He's athletic. He's got natural leadership skills. He's young. He's in his prime. He's healthy now. He's, I think, been in a lot of different systems. He's played for a number of different quarterbacks. There has not been a lot of continuity around him that way. I think he's got a huge upside. And
Gruden knows that he has been out of the game for a while and has a lot to prove.
I have a lot to prove. There's no question. I have not coached since 2008. I haven't won a game since 2008. I haven't lost any either. So I just want to keep that in perspective.
So John Gruden, officially the new head coach for the Oakland Raiders. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon on the Steve Jones Show here on WKOK. Steve will be back in the Sunbury Motor Studio tomorrow afternoon. Neil Coulong will join us. We'll talk Steelers football. Reuben Frank, NBC Sports Philadelphia. On the Eagles, he'll be with us on Thursday. And, of course, Steve's brother Kevin with our weekly pick segment on Friday. Appreciate you joining us. Have a great night. Don't forget to subscribe to the Steve Jones Show podcast on both iTunes, Apple Podcast app, and Google Play. WKOK.
You're listening to News Radio 1070 WKOK Sunbury. You can hear us anywhere in the world with the Sunbury Broadcasting Corporation app.